What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Commentary for you. So there's a lot to unpack in this video, but what I'm going to do is first of all start by saying Chantal loves to come online and kind of infer that when she's not doing videos, going live, that reaction channels suffer. I would actually argue that point. I would say that you have channels like Eyelash here. You also have channels like Girl Please that'll show in a moment. And when Chantal's not making repetitive content, because let's be fair to ourselves, that's all this is. If you've watched Chantal for more than 2 years, you know the process of the diets, the surgeries, the acquaintances, the partners. And if you look at it at the most granular level, right? She left Canada. The relationship that she had with Pete's and Natter would have them questioning whether they would ever see her again. Animals needed to be rehomed. If you look at the situation as granular again as possible, with Salah, she leaves Kuwait. No intent or capacity to go back, unsure of how the relationship will culminate, and pets that need to be rehomed, if not at least taken care of by someone outside of her. I understand there's a lot of things that factor into the relationships between Natter and Pete's and Salah, but at its core, it's very similar what happens to those relationships if you just look at the basics. So to that point, there's a lot of things that are left to, I don't want to say an investigation, but speculation, opinion, questioning. And that's where reaction channels, I think, thrive, because that's not the same old content that we've seen, right? That's going to the next step and saying, okay, what caused all this? At face value, we know it's the same Chantal. We know the way she treats people. I mean, again, the only person that really ever benefited from Chantal being in their life was Natter got an iPad at the end of the day. But I want to talk about exactly what's been taking place in Kuwait. And one of the things that I find intriguing about this is it's not something that we would otherwise look into. Now, with Kuwait, they're doing something I actually really, really think is a good idea. They're understanding in their economic system that they do need people from other countries to come work. It's part of what is going to make their country grow. It's going to help them have an international business presence. But they're becoming increasingly mindful of two things. Number one, the people that come into the country to work can put a strain on their healthcare system. So they want to make sure that anyone that comes in the country, number one, is doing work that technically does need to be done there. And number two, the people that are there are healthy enough that if anything were to happen, or they were start to have an illness, that they can, number one, not be dependent on burdening the healthcare system, but also, number two, have a way of leaving in case they do take ill. So, to me, those are really good concepts to have. In short, they're basically saying, we only want you here to work if you're in good enough health to work and if you're actually going to provide a benefit to our country. If not, whatever job you're doing, you can continue to do in your own country. Now, the other part of that is they're also starting to be very mindful about the number of people coming into their country and taking employment from people that could be working there. So, this does a lot for the business requirement of the expat. Now, if we go back and we look at some dates, you'll remember initially when Chantal got there, they talked about, the whole Vandelay fragrance empire, the Beezer spray, the website. We went over this months ago. Now, I understand that FFG does have a bottle of Beezer spray, but what I would suggest is find me one singular person that bought Beezer spray from Chantal, from Salah, from their business that received it. I don't think there's one person. The website has not worked for months, and for all we know, the business has dissolved. So, kind of that business that they would have would be very, very hard to prove valuable as an expat. You're not really doing anything. You maybe did sell to some local stores, but internationally, there's nothing that would prevent you from not doing that outside of Kuwait. Now, I want to talk about the dates of these videos because they're very telling. Because we know Chantal is emotional, she's very reactionary, she doesn't plan well. So, November 2nd was the day that she came online. She was very upset based on her eating. And she essentially said she was leaving Salah and she had to go home. Now, this is over a month ago, mind you. Now, we do know ultimately she goes home, but this also was working within the same time frame where the couples channel had, as I pointed out, lost monetization intentionally and then was carried back over to Kuwait. So again, if you want to think about this from a business perspective, they're looking at the couples channel as a business. She constantly talked about going out and about to Kuwait and showing the city, even though it was never done. That is a business, technically, that you could say would only be able to be done there. Now, what was changing in October that would have had her need to react? What would it be changing where she would need to start going to a doctor? Well, here's what I would suggest. One of the policies that they put in place was designed to, again, ensure that their healthcare system is not burdened by people outside of the country. And what they did is on October 2nd of this year, they essentially approved a policy that was going to increase the amount of people that was working in the public and private sector in Kuwait. So this would essentially have their couples channel be threatened by any other vlogger, any other content creator in that area. But more importantly, what they did was they determined that you needed to have health care if you were going to stay there. And this was mandatory. So if you look here, it says another mandatory condition of obtaining and extending a residence permit in Kuwait is the presence of health insurance. Also, on the basis of the policy, you can get high quality medical care abroad and save significant money on treatment. When taking out the health insurance policy, we advise you to pay attention to the advantages and features, as we will choose verified agents. You can also take out a reliable insurance and payments by using this link. So this is perhaps the most damaging aspect Chantal has to go back to Kuwait. Because in short, we know, based on her own words, okay, she said she was an expat there. We also know, based on her own words, that healthcare was something she didn't have. Going back to when they went to Thailand, there was a concern that she didn't have healthcare for the trip. Now, the reality would be, most cases, to get healthcare, you were going to have to go to a physician. So it's interesting that all of a sudden, we started to see this doctor's office, which we'd never seen before. All of a sudden, we started to get very manic about having to leave. And certainly, I would believe that that was due to the fact that she knew she had to get health insurance. She probably thought in November it was an improbability. They more than likely gave her an extension to try to find an insurance company that would cover her. And then as she realized this was becoming less and less available, she decided she had to leave. And that's why we're hearing this 2 to 3 year before we go back scenario, because she knows unless she gets insurance, no questions asked, she cannot go back. Now, there are so many pre-existing conditions. There are so many current conditions. There is so much content available with her online. I don't believe that any insurance company right now is going to step up and provide her health insurance without an incredible amount of money being needed. More than likely, I would say money that she would not be justified in paying. So to me, knowing this and knowing why this was in part put in place, and if you look at this, it's more than just the insurance, right? They wanted to make sure that current expats living there had paid all their debts to Kuwait. So traffic fines, utility bills, all of that needed to be paid. So they were actively looking to get people out of the country so that they could replace them with local Kuwaitis to do that work, which, to be honest, as an American, very admirable thing for them to be doing. We hear all the time about our jobs being outsourced to other countries. Here's a country basically saying, listen, we're going to limit the outsourcing in our country because we're going to protect our worker. And as a matter of fact, we're going to take a further step to make sure that if you are having someone work here, that they are keeping up to date on not only everything they owe our country, but moreover, they're going to be in a position to pay their way should anything happen to them. And if they can't do that, then they can go back to their home country and work. That is the exact scenario Chantal has been put in, and I think every one of us knows there is absolutely no way she is going to be able to take all these responsibilities head on, get what she needs to get done, and go back to Kuwait. So in my opinion, the reason we're seeing Chantal back is because she knew she had to leave the country, and she knows with what's required of her to return, she will never go back to Kuwait. Love to know your thoughts on this. Appreciate you watching it. I will be back soon as I can with more content.